After a decade of debate and reform, Connecticut has made some important changes to prison reentry and the cost of criminal justice. But as you all know, there's a lot of work left to be done. And that work to us in higher education, and I'm sure to many, many, many others, constituents of the state, is critically important. Because there is only so much money we can afford, only so many activities. We can do only so many things as a citizenry. And the more and more we spend on incarceration, the less there is to do the other jobs that need to be done.
And you'll see that in 2002, when we first were talking to Connecticut, you were one of the fastest growing prison populations in the country. When we looked at 2010 to 2012, you can see that you are the state with one of the fastest declining prison populations in the country.
But here's another factor. Those same kids are going on probation. Recidivism rates that used to be in the 60s are now in the high 50s. And they're coming down because we've put programs and support services in place. What we have not done well yet is we have not been able to pinpoint how much are we saving from the changes we've made in the juvenile system? How much are we saving from what we've done on technical violations? And take that block of money and commit it to the very locations where our clients are coming from.
You know, 2 years out for a massive change in a public policy, you wouldn't expect to see huge changes. So I think when I wrote the report, I was a little disheartened. I was kind of like, oh, come on, people. But now, 10 years out, I could look and see that, you need to crawl before you can walk. It's really good to see that everything has gone for the positive, and hopefully it'll keep going forward. All of this stuff can be used for good.
We're always going to be trying to improve the system. With luck, we're going to bring down recidivism rates. It will come down slowly. There isn't any magic bullet that's going to solve the problem overnight. But if we've got the information, the feedback that Ramey talked about, so that we can identify what works and what doesn't work, continue to improve those, invest in the programs and the policies that work, and continue to improve the outcome, we'll have a better state of Connecticut, and we'll have a government that maybe costs a little less than it does now.
Now, what's going to happen when we attempt to change the conversation? What's going to happen when we take a more ecologically focused analysis and say, wait a minute here, we have people growing up in specific toxic, concentrated areas of poverty. Are we going to tackle that? It's much easier for us to look at this man or this man or this man or that woman and try to figure out, doing an R&R model, what to do about them. What's going to happen when politically we have to address that? In my view, the major problem we're facing right now is not a technical one. It's a political one.
You talk to parolees and say, well, what are your chances of making it? Really, everybody's kind of in a lottery game. It's like, we don't know with any certainty whether people are going to get out and succeed or not. We live in a system where every year about 16,000 sentenced people leave prison. And of those 16,000 people, 75% of them are not completing their first prison sentence. They're completing their second or third or fourth or fifth sentence.
So the proposal is to create something called a certificate of rehabilitation. The idea is that individuals who have undergone substantial rehabilitation would be able to apply through the Court Support Services Division for one of these certificates. And the certificate would have the same legal effect as the current provisional pardons are from the Board of Pardons and Paroles. The certificate could be something that someone would then present to an employer, or if they're applying for a license before the state licensing board, would be able to present this in conjunction with their application and hopefully increase their chances of obtaining a job.
What I'm hearing is there's this plethora of issues that go into making a person a future inmate, and you put these things into a meat grinder and move this person through a system, and then when they're on their way out on the back end, as Ivan put it, there's no actual way to care for them. Like, there's so many hurdles that come with figuring out your new path. You're always at a step behind. If we're talking about a long-term change in the way that we address criminal justice in our society, then we're going to have to think about a long-term cultural shift.
We're here in the land of the free, the home of the brave. In the history of the world, no nation has ever incarcerated so many of its citizens as we are. That's wrong. I don't care how you slice it. That's wrong. We have more black men in prison today than we had in slavery in 1863. That's wrong. That's simply wrong. 34 Western nations with a population, a free population, 2.5 times ours, they don't have half of our prison population.
It was very discouraging to see him go out and look for work, you know, and even myself had an opportunity of going through one of those construction trainings that they offer, you know, oftentimes to individuals who are coming out of incarceration. You know, it's our hopes that some of that stuff can start getting done while they're in there.
Breaking down that gap and that wall that exists between the people in our society that we incarcerate and the people that we don't is so key to bringing about the cultural shift that I think Kennard was talking about, and to really having success in criminal justice reform, because unless we see what's going on behind those prison walls, we don't know what we're talking about and we don't know what we're doing.
You know, how do you get jobs for people that have been incarcerated and then come out, done their time, and now they're ready to reintegrate into society? So it's up to the business community to be open, to be hiring people like that. And that, as I think many of you are aware, has been a challenge.
We really have come a long way. There is so much more data and so much more evidence than we had even 10 years ago, but we've got a ways to go. And that's what Results First is here in Connecticut and across the country to help do, to fill that information gap and to use that information to help make some of the more difficult policy and budget decisions, certainly in the criminal justice arena and in some other social policy areas as well.
The idea is to lead to the reintegration into society as a productive member of society.
Something dawned on me. If you treat people like humans, they will act like humans. And this statement kind of carries throughout every piece of what we saw of the way they run their prisons there.
Challenges exist to be overcome. Although I believe we've made some progress on this agenda. It hasn't been as fast as I would like it to be, but I envision that there will be a very close working relationship between the Judiciary Committee and some of the individuals and the organizations.
When we come together, though, such as we did with the juvenile justice reforms that we have successfully enacted, and we trust one another across party lines, great things happen.
Education, jobs, and community activities are something that we have to put back in our communities right now so that we stop the erosion of families and they stop the continuing, I call it the march into prison that a lot of our children are suffering with now. So that's what I think we need to do.
And that there are different choices that we need to make, and that there are different champions that we need to make, and that you're sitting in this room. And that if we do it together, we never thought that we would make 16 and 17-year-olds children again. But we did, and we went from the back of the pack to the top of the pack in the way we treat our children in this state. If we can do that, and we thought it was impossible, then we can take care of this system that we've invested in that actually leads, I believe, to our economic decline.
They may not be able to devote tomorrow to putting together a plan, but the sacrifice must be made in order to do it. Ain't gonna happen just because you wish it to be. Somebody has got to work at it to make that happen. I'm just trying to paint a picture of what they said about the future. Everyone talked about jobs and their creation. We may not be together on how you create that job and how much money you would need to do it and where those jobs would go and how do you set up a system to make sure that the people you want to have get them, and what does that do for those who do not get it? Do they get peed off that somehow you're doing something for one group and not the other? So it's not easy. It can be done, It needs to be done. I think just for me, there ought to be the setting aside of a certain amount of money, derived from somewhere, saving. Not anything new, but derived from somewhere. I got this messed up notion in my head, that you can squeeze it out someplace and you can set an example by doing. And that will become a motivation for people to have some hope that somebody cares somewhere and may inspire them to try a little harder. But without anything taking place, you give people very little to hope on. And they need something to hope on, that you're making an attempt, that you're trying to do something.